Test, 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 test. And hello, everyone. This is Tom Ballard, the Groundwater Guy. We're here with Groundwater Talk Live today, and our topic of conversation is going to be on California water conservation versus infrastructure. And California is notorious for rationing water. They've had a lot of drought problems here in recent years, and the answer is not not investing in infrastructure much, but and they'll probably deny that, but they really don't invest what they need to in infrastructure. Just look at the recent decision on the Huntington Beach desalination plant, where they basically torpedoed that entire project after many millions of dollars spent on developing that. The Coastal Commission just said nope. So where do you go? So California goes back to the water rationing issue, and probably not the best way to approach things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get going, just wanted to say if you could be so kind as to drop a comment in the chat. Also, if you're watching this on a recording, and you might on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is being flaky as always, and I'm not sure if this is broadcasting on LinkedIn. So maybe we post the recording up there later, and I apologize for that. But LinkedIn is just a really flaky platform to broadcast to. So I don't know what it is, but they have challenges all the time. So this may just be on YouTube today. At any rate, your comments, your likes, your shares really help advance the cause here, and it helps us beat the algorithm, as it were, and gets the word out to people. So, and that's what we want is more audience here to share this information. I think it's we put together some good information every week, and I like to get the word out on things. All right, let's move on then. So, really, what the choices are in California, and where they're really falling down on things is you have the choice. And this article I'm going to share today really puts it very succinctly is, are you going to promote abundance, or are you going to manage scarcity? And that's really what's going on. California is choosing the managing scarcity by rationing and doing all these cutbacks. And I'll say right up front here is that abundance to fix the California water infrastructure is going to take an investment. And that's where people have problems. A lot of politicians, you probably heard me say this multiple times before, but a lot of politicians really run on the every 2 years cycle is the voting cycle. And so long-term planning, long-term investment really is not politically palatable, but we've reached the point where it has to be. I mean, it needs to get done. And it's going to take a lot of money to fix California's water infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of other infrastructure in California that needs to be fixed, but water is one of them. We seem to have plenty of money to spend on bullet trains and stuff like that. But water, the interesting thing about water is that they pass these water bonds every few years, 10 billion here, 11 billion there, and the money just gets frittered away on pet projects and who knows what, but it doesn't really go towards the infrastructure like it needs to. So the article I'm going to talk about, mainly be focused on today, really presents a plan to improve California's infrastructure, puts a price tag on it, and it compares and contrasts things to the water rationing approach that California has taken. And I will also say one thing: the problem with rationing and getting people to cut back is that eventually people get tired of it. They start cheating on it, and you can have fines and all that, but people are going to cheat on it. And so you don't necessarily achieve your goals because because people get worn out just conserving. I mean, only washing their clothes once a week. Not flushing the toilet. Not doing the dishes. It's people. It wears people out, and therefore they tend to cheat on it, and the rationing basically loses its effectiveness over time. The longer it goes on, the less likely people are to comply with it. So it's got some challenges from the very start to take a rationing approach because people being people, they don't want to do it. So all right, so let's kind of get into things here. Um, I where is my all right. This is the article I'm talking about here. It is published in the California Globe. It is written by Edward Ring, who's with who is he with? If we go down the bottom here, he's with the California Policy Center. I believe the Pacific Research Institute is also involved in this as well. They've done a whole series of articles here on what they title abundance, and I can just show you. Here's some of their articles here. This is the most recent one we're going to talk about today, the fight for more water. But they really kind of go through a lot of stuff here. And so I think it's well worth looking at these to see what they're thinking. They are, admittedly, they are a conservative think tank type of environment, and but that is that's kind of where the thinking has come from. You go on the opposite side of the political spectrum, and it's all about cutting back things and rationing and dealing with a finite amount of water. California can do a lot more with the water they have is really what it comes down to. So I'm going to go through this article. I wanted to show you here the link. It is in the California Globe. Here is the URL up here. You can check that out for yourself, and but I'm gonna actually put this in a PDF format so it's a little bit easier to read. You don't have the all the advertisement, and the text on here is kind of small. I could blow that up, but I'm going to go to different format here. One of the articles also, before we get going, one of the articles he references in here is this one. This was written in 2013. Very, very instructive. It's kind of a pretty cynical piece. It's by Yasha Levine. Not quite sure who he is, but he probably tends more towards the left end of the political spectrum from what reading through. But given that, there's some very information in here. Very good information about water oligarchs, and he's talking about water oligarchs here and how people make money through a lot of these big ranches in California and these big farms. They buy and sell water rights, and they're making their money through water scarcity. So abundant water is not in their best interest. So it's really an oligarch approach, and very instructive. It's a fairly long read, but it is interesting. It sorry, somebody always calls while you're trying to do your show. So anyway, this is a very interesting read. I would urge you to kind of look it up and read through it. It's instructive. Keep in mind it's kind of spun from a leftist viewpoint, but that said, you can still learn something from it, and it's well worth reading because it kind of opens your eyes to some things. He did do some good research, so I would definitely look at that. So that's so let me another resource I want to point out is this one. Steve Greenhut, and Steve Greenhut, yeah, he is Pacific Research Institute. Sorry, I got them confused here. The article's written by a guy from the California Policy Center. Steve Greenhut is with Pacific Research Institute. This is a book on winning the water wars. Kind of the same approach. It's really promoting abundance rather than managing scarcity. So there's that phrase. I am kind of about a third of the way into this, and it's got some good information. I would urge you to get that. It's not very expensive. You can find it in a number of different places. I got the Kindle version off of Amazon, but you can get the hard copy as well. But it's really well worth reading this. So I would recommend that. Kind of the the one that people think of most often is Cadillac Desert, dealing with the drought, and while that's a good book, it's got some interesting premises and some biases there. So this really approaches it from the point of we can have abundance or at least an adequate water supply, and we don't always have to be managing scarcity. And so this is an approach to that. It kind of lays out the whole thing in a book format. So this book, Winning the Water Wars, and the article I'm talking about today are really tied together. So with that, let's dive into this article here. And this of course is part 15 of the abundance series I showed you. But this is the one that's it's really pretty interesting here, and they really talk about the California Policy Institute's approach to creating abundance in California and their efforts there. A lot of that has been marred by politics. California is definitely a Democrat state, and even the Republicans in California, who probably should be on board with supporting something like this, tend to shy away from anything they consider to be toxic. And when you start talking about water and going up against the water oligarchs and the people that benefit from water scarcity, then you become a pariah of sorts, and that's kind of what's going on here. But so they have been facing some difficult challenges. It's one of those things where you really need to put politics aside, and the point here, summing it up really quick, is that California really needs to invest a lot of capital in water infrastructure. So with that, let's go through here and really look at things, and he really starts off with rationing water, and California is doing all this stuff. It's not just the state legislature doing it; it's the governor's office is looking at rationing water and how you do that, and executive orders and all this. So really, what kind of the three biggies here is restricting agricultural water allocations. Um, Really, they're taking millions of acres of irrigated farmlands out of production because there's no water to deliver to them. Banning outdoor watering and entirely in urban areas is another one. Trying to get residential water use down to 40 gallons per day per resident. That's really challenging because that's not showering every day. That's for sure. So it's basically a sponge bath in the sink. So is that what we're coming down to? It looks like it might be. So, and then there's the stick part of the approach is heavy fines to urban water agencies that can't enforce the restrictions overall. Now that's not they're not fining people because Joe down the street is using too much water. It's the overall water allocation to the district itself. So, and as they point out here, this is a lose-lose proposition. It's going to wreak economic havoc and diminish the quality of life. And like I said earlier, people tend to, the more this stuff goes on, they're willing to pitch in and help out. If it's several months and we got to cut back for several months, you run on into multiple year scenarios. People are less willing to do that, and the rationing starts to kind of fall apart because people say, I don't want to take a shower once a week. I want to take a shower twice a week or 3 times a week, or whatever the heck I want, and so it tends to fall apart, and so. The fines are certainly an incentive to keep in compliance, but if you have your customers who are out there defying the restrictions, then it becomes really hard to maintain uh, that reduced need, and you're looking at potential fines. So, are they actually going to fine people? I think they have, but it's only in very egregious cases. So once again, lose proposition, and over the long term, rationing just fails because people don't comply. So they go in and talk about the initiative they came up with trying to qualify for the coming ballot, but they didn't make it. So, and they talk a little bit about the political resistance that they ran into, but really what they're saying is the passage of this initiative would have eliminated water scarcity in California, or at least taken a big step in that direction. So they're talking about their plans to get this on the ballot in the future. And I would think if they get it on the ballot, um, there's a good chance you can get it passed, but there's a lot of political resistance to even getting it on the ballot. So because there are people out there that are invested in water scarcity, and a lot of that is the people who are buying and selling the water rights. So saying their plans are worthless without either access to millions of dollars in donations or a volunteer movement, uh, uh, building a grassroots movement to demand more water infrastructure can be easily disrupted by opponents, and it is. So there's a lot of people that have an interest in maintaining the status quo, which is water scarcity. And California, if properly managed, has a lot of water, so a lot more than gets used. And so we're we're not looking at a shortage of water per se, but how that water is actually managed is really what they're saying here. So anyway, they go into the problems they ran into trying to qualify this, um, and how their natural allies really were resistant. so um, now they that once they get past the whining a little bit, uh, they talk about where some of the controversy comes in. Um, uh, that people liked most of the plan, but they didn't like including reservoirs and desalination as eligible projects, and to improve provisions that would have streamlined environmental regulations. And we all know that environmental regulations and the red tape and the regulatory environment just really increases the costs of everything in California. It undergoes endless reviews, takes years and years, and requires just a lot of money, and really double triples the cost of these projects. So it's really tough to get things approved with the environmental regulations. So they would have proposed streamlining environmental regulations, and in California, that's a challenging proposition. But in order to get these things through, you need to do it, and we know it can be done because pet projects like the California Bullet Train, they have waived a lot of environmental regulations for that particular project, and because it's such a pet project, nobody says anything about it. So all they're doing here is asking to kind of do the same thing for water infrastructure, but there is resistance. And so you get the normal hysteria that this is an extreme threat to the environment, and we just can't do this. So it torpedoes the whole thing. So, and that's and as they point out too, it's a very effective strategy because who wants to destroy Mother Earth, and when you start painting it in that picture, then people go, I don't know, and most people. Most people's inclination, most voters, are to understand the bare minimum of what they're voting on, so they don't dig into all the details. And that is the challenge of taking something that where you have some political resistance, is it's pretty easy to mount an effective campaign and this is what happened here. So anyway, a little more whining. Uh, they um, they talk about big ag. The big agricultural companies that own a lot of land have gotten their more than their fair subsidized water, and this is true. Um, but they also point out that our current mode of middle class living is unsustainable. So the way the water is managed right now, middle class living is not as sustainable as it exists now. So that's kind of a scary proposition for people. And you think they think beyond that, but we got the scare tactics of we're going to destroy Mother Earth and everybody's going to die immediately. So that's what you get going on, and it's effective resistance. And then he does talk about the article I pointed out earlier, the Yasha Levine article in 2013, A Journey Through Oligarch Valley. Um, and he calls it a screed, and it really is, but there's some great information. I would urge you to go read it, and take some of the things with a grain of salt, because he definitely has the point of view of more from the left, but there's some valuable information out there. He did some good research, so I would definitely go through that. I'm not going to probably do an article on it because he does use a lot of profanity throughout, so probably not going to post that up here. But it's a worthwhile read if you're doing some research on that, because it does kind of open your eyes on things, even though it's written in 2013, so it's 9 years old at this point. Definitely a good read. Um, so what this guy is pointing out is that you could disagree with Levine's overall premise without dismissing his entire argument, but that Levine really missed it by saying that the oligarchs, all of them, not just big ag, have a vested interest in less water, not more water. And this is a key point, is maintaining the status quo, because there's a lot of people out there making a lot of money. There's some big ag interests that have, as Levine's article points out, that have some huge acreage, and they have all the water rights that go with it, and they buy and sell water, and keeping the price of water up and not having a free market for water, which would be part of this overall proposal, is in their interest, maintaining the status quo, because the status quo for these guys, the oligarchs, is, as he terms them, it's probably, most people think in terms of Russian oligarchs and in that part of the world, but we have ours here too. So they're not necessarily called oligarchs in this country, but that's pretty much what they are. So they're the controllers. They have all the money and the land. They're the controllers, and they fix things to benefit them. And one of these is the status quo of having less water. They can sell water rights for a lot higher price than if there's an abundance of water. So you start to see a certain motivation here. So maybe all those big agricultural operations with the fallow fields aren't necessarily about, not getting the subsidized water from the state, but really wheeling and dealing in water rights. So something to think about. So anyway, what he's pointing out is their initiative would have resulted in tens of billions of dollars from the state's general fund going to Los Angeles and other major coastal cities to pay for reusing 100% of urban wastewater, to restore portions of the Los Angeles River Bay with natural habitat and spreading basins to recharge aquifers, and to replace toxic pipes in Los Angeles public schools. So once again, a little resistance there to spending money on Los Angeles, because people, aren't real happy with Los Angeles necessarily in the state. They see it as this big money suck, water suck. Everything goes to Los Angeles. So, and then he makes reference to Stephen Greenhut's book, "Winning the Water Wars," and he's got a quote from the book here, and this is worth reading. The state needs to reform its regulatory barriers to water trading so water rights holders are better able to sell water to those who need it most. California also needs better pricing system to allow markets to work their magic, but pricing must come against a backdrop of water abundance rather than one that leaves everyone fighting over an artificially capped supply. So this is the key to an open market in water, is having an abundance of water. Right now, the oligarchs have a shortage of water. They can command premium prices for their water rights, and they do. So they really have no interest in changing the status quo. So because, as he points out here, when water pricing comes against a backdrop of water abundance, to quote the Greenhut book, one thing is certain: the price of water will drop, and this is true. So water becomes cheaper because it is more abundance. If you have more of something, the law of economics says the price is going to drop. So, so the prime beneficiaries of lower prices will not be big ag and hedge funds that are making money right now, but it's going to be smaller farmers. There's going to be less reason to buy out these smaller farms and incorporate them into these large corporate farms that are practicing bad farming practices and just basically dealing in the water rights. So we're looking at the smaller farmers will benefit from this. They don't have the lobby power that big ag does and the oligarchs do. So they have a smaller voice in this that often does not get heard, but they would benefit from lower water prices and more of an abundance, obviously. So also, lower water prices will also benefit urban water agencies and their ratepayers, including businesses that rely on affordable water. So you're seeing you would see a shift from the oligarchs and big ags and the hedge funds benefiting from the scarcity to small farmers, smaller businesses, urban water agencies benefiting from the lower water prices and able to provide abundant water and not dealing with having to beat up on their customers to enforce a 40-gallon-a-day limit per person. So this is a huge benefit. So now he goes on to talk about costs, actually. So to pay for more water, they go back and what they're looking at is the 1957 California Water Plan. Its total estimated cost in 1957 was $11.8 billion, and they point out that the California state budget in 1957 was $1.9 billion. So you're talking eight or nine times the existing state budget for the total project, and the initial capital outlay of $440 million back then, which was 23% of the entire budget. So huge chunk. However, California responded they were thinking big at that time. So that's really what we're looking at there. And I guess the 11.8 billion is really like 6 times what their annual budget was. But the point is, it was multiples of their state budget, and they invested in that to bring water. We are too cautious nowadays. We're not thinking big like that. So what they're looking at is basically the same price tag at this point. The 11.8 billion in 1957 is now worth 113.8 billion. They're looking at taking that same number. That is only equal to 40% of today's 286 billion budget. So while back in 1957 they were talking multiples of the budget, we're talking some percentage of the budget. Obviously, you'd have to pay for. There's not that much spare room in the budget, so you'd have to pay through it through bonds and other types of financing methods. But the point is this is not an unreasonable cost these days to deal with this type of significant infrastructure upgrade. So he goes on to talk about here is basically the plan, and just wanted to point this out here. So they've actually tied millions of acre feet per year to each of these projects, and then the cost in billions of dollars. So number one, the biggest bang for the buck is raise the height of Shasta Dam. That's relatively inexpensive for what you get, and that's been bandied about. Shasta Dam is a federal project, but I think you could probably certainly work with the feds on that to get that done. Beyond that, he's looking at urban and agricultural conservation programs. Now, we're not saying that what he's not saying is that you have to do away with conservation. Conservation is a component, but we need to de-emphasize it as our main strategy and work on the infrastructure side of things. So spreading basins for aquifer recharge, that's going to contribute 1 million acre feet per year, $5 billion price tag. Probably the largest item on here is urban water recycling to potable standards. That is going to be taking wastewater, recycling it to potable standards. So you're talking 2 million acre feet a year at a price tag of 18 billion. So inland desalination of brackish water. We know that the delta has brackish water. Some of the deeper groundwater is brackish in California. So looking at some smaller desal plants inland is one method to deal with that. Construction and expansion of off-stream reservoirs. Build the sites reservoir. This is one that's been kicked around for a long time. That's 3.5 billion. That would add 0.3 million acre feet per year. Facilities to capture urban runoff for aquifer recharge. A lot of times the urban runoff just is funneled into the streams and then out to the ocean. We don't capture that at all. So we can do a better job with that because that's basically free water. It rains, it flows into the streams, goes out to the ocean. We never touch it. So there's a source of water. You're looking at 500,000 acre feet per year. $8 billion price tag, not cheap, but certainly doable. Coastal desalination, $5 billion. That would be like the Huntington Beach plant that was denied by the Coastal Commission. They really need to relook at that. I don't know if they're going to go back and do that, but desalination, they probably underemphasize it here because that's really something that works great in certain parts of the world and something we need to do more here. And then build the Temperance Flat Reservoir. So that's 0.15 million acre feet per year at a cost of $3 billion. So there's $56.5 billion to provide 6.7 million acre feet per year of water supply. So now they look at some projects to increase resiliency because resiliency is important because we do have aging infrastructure. There's make no doubt about it. We saw what happened with Oroville Dam a number of years back, and it's scary to contemplate what deferred maintenance and aging infrastructure is going to happen. It could put people in danger at the worst case scenario, but and most likely it's going to reduce our water supply over time because things are going to break and we're just not going to be able to fix them very well. It's a lot more expensive to fix something than it is to maintain it. So, but when you're cutting costs and deferring maintenance, this means that those maintenance costs build up over time, and ultimately, you got to maintain things. You can't just kick the can down the road forever, and that's kind of what we've done. So there's some money in here. There's $20 billion in here for for increasing resiliency of water infrastructure. So retrofitting existing dams to modern standards, that's a safety thing, and we don't want any failed dams. Urban aquifer remediation. There's a lot of aquifers out there that are contaminated, especially in urban areas. That needs to be looked at as a source of drinking water. Retrofit of existing aqueducts. We see in certain areas where those aqueducts have fractured, broken, and shifted due to uh, um, well, when we pump the groundwater, we get subsidence, so some of that is going on there and is damaging the aqueducts. We need to fix that and just not put off maintenance anymore. So, seismic retrofits to levees statewide, focusing on the delta first. That's something that's important. A lot of these levees were built back in the gold rush days or started in those days, and really nobody really knows how they were constructed totally, other than they're just there. So there needs to be some seismic retrofits because California is subject to ground shifting and moving, even if you don't have a flat out earthquake. So, and additional water projects they're throwing in here. Most of these are $10 billion projects, except for research. They got $2 billion in there for research. So, restore urban riparian ecosystems, including spreading basins. So this would be along streams. So once again, some spreading basins to provide aquifer recharge for the shallow aquifers. Restoring rural wetlands, including spreading basins. So that's getting out into the rural areas. Upgrading urban water treatment delivery systems. Replacing toxic pipes in public facilities, including schools. There are still a lot of lead pipes out there that need to be replaced. So this would handle some of that. That doesn't increase supply or abundance, but it certainly helps maintain existing infrastructure, and it's a health issue. So, and then finally, researching new water treatment technologies. That's an ever-evolving field, and a lot of that can benefit from additional research funds. So you look at this, you put it together, and you look at we got 56.5 billion for increasing water supply. We have 20 billion for resiliency projects and additional water projects. A lot of this is recharge and restoring wetlands. Basically, $42 billion there. So for a grand total of $118.5 billion, which is pretty much the equivalent of what they spent in the California Water Project in 1957. So, or the California Water Plan, as it were. So, now every one of these budget items would qualify as an eligible project under their initiative, with the only limitation being that funding would cease when 5 million acre feet of water per year was being produced by new projects. So they up here have, this all adds up to 6.7 million acre feet per year. They're saying when we hit 5 million acre feet from these new projects, then we would cease funding it. So their goal really is 5 billion new acre feet of water, which would go a long way towards creating that abundancy that they're talking about. So they're saying the order of the projects to increase the supply of water is not random. So they are listed in priority order, and you can see some of the bigger projects are more towards the top. It's and they go on and do a little bit more whining here. So there's definitely some whining in this article, but they're saying getting reliable and consistent cost projections is difficult, and that is true because you're just looking at projections right now, and that is things are changing. The supply chain issues we got out there right now, so it's even more difficult than ever to do projected budgets for long-term projects. So. And at the top of the list is of course the Shasta Dam, raising the height there, and that's kind of been a project that's been bandied around for quite a while. So that would be a priority. And he goes back again and talks about there's some politics involved, especially since Shasta Dam is a federal project. Uh, but it is part of California's water supply. So he does talk about the Huntington Beach desalination plant, um, and then, you know, at the same time, wastewater recycling. So these are all efforts to get to the point of of abundance. So basically, what he's summarizing the amount of money it would take to create permanent water abundance in California in this century is the amount that the planners back in 1957 would have considered trivial. I don't know if they considered it trivial back then because it was a big stretch, but they went ahead and did it. So I think trivial might be a little exaggerating a little bit, but it's certainly a significant chunk of money, but not beyond the means to do. And these are all worthy projects. So, um, but the politics is getting in the way. So he presents a case here for the government subsidizing construction of water infrastructure. And he points out that affordable and abundant water is a core enabler of economic prosperity. And clearly, this is true. You cannot have a prosperous society. You cannot have businesses without water and an adequate supply of water. Abundance maybe is too much, but at least an adequate supply of water is what's necessary in order to enable economic prosperity and business growth and people being able to live comfortably. So that is water is really key. It all starts from the water. Um, so he's appealing to conservatives here. Because conservatives generally are resistant to the government subsidies, but in this case, you're really funding other government projects. So I think it's basically shifting things around in the government. You're not necessarily funding private entities like we are right now with the oligarchs. Basically, when you have a water agency that's just buying water from an oligarch, you're basically funding private industry through that water agency. So their money is going to buy water at premium prices because of the scarcity issue. So that's something I'd be more worried about than, and this is something that Levin pointed out in his screed. So that's why you should read that. Um, but so he's talking that also if you're going to continue the rationing and managing scarcity, you're going to be spending stuff on enforcement, hardwares and fines and enforcing fines and dragging people into court. Things like dual residential meters to monitor indoor versus outdoor use. And additional billions basically spent to subsidize low-income families that cannot afford their water bills, food, and housing, and businesses as well. So it's not like managing scarcity comes with a price tag of free. It doesn't. It's there's a lot of hidden costs there. So it's not like you're comparing 118 billion versus $0. There's a lot of money, and it's a long-term thing, because if you're not investing in that additional infrastructure, now you're looking at subsidizing people's water, and that's just ongoing. That's forever. And as the state's population grows, this is forever. That number only gets bigger. So why not invest now? Take the hit, invest now in the infrastructure, and avoid this ongoing obligation. So. Another point he makes, it's that he says it would be a productive compromise to accept the reality of bureaucracy and litigation doubling or tripling the cost, which is normally what happens in California, of infrastructure if the most worthwhile projects were ultimately built. And he's talking, yeah, a little cynical here, but wasteful excess spending would trickle through the economy as bureaucrats and litigators spent their paychecks. So, so it's a form of economic aid, I guess, is you're distributing kickbacks and excess spending to these people who would spend it in the economy, and it's good for the economy. So, I think that's a little bit cynical on his part. So, uh, but what he's saying, and this is the real point here, is the problem with this reasoning of taking 30 years to get permits and just accepting that is that it accepts the legitimacy of scarcity. So we accept the status quo, that we're not going to change that. And we don't have to. That is the point here. We don't have to. We just need to get people educated and get them behind this investment in infrastructure. So so anyway, kind of getting down here and wrapping it up. The initiative we developed more than anything else was an attempt to inspire Californians to think big. Well, we wanted more to think big, but we do need to change the shifting, or we do need to change the thinking and get them to shift towards thinking that we can have abundant or at least adequate water in California by investing in this infrastructure. And it's probably the price tag today, or over the next 20 years would be at least the equivalent of what you would spend by managing scarcity. And think about the fact that the other costs of managing scarcity are businesses leaving California. You're losing your tax base. Fallowed agricultural field, mom and pop farmers going out of business, selling out to big ag, their water rights getting snatched up, and now you got more control over that by big ag, and back to the oligarch argument again. So you're investing more power and money and profit into those people. You're not really changing anything for the better. So we need to change people's thinking and get them behind the whole infrastructure type of argument here. So that's kind of the article here. Like I say, this is this article by Levin, and it's well worth reading. You can see it kind of goes on and on, but a lot of good information there. And I think that it's well worth downloading and reading that if you kind of want to understand how water scarcity benefits the oligarchs in a certain segment of society and does not benefit the middle class at all. So we're getting paid, and we're basically paying the price for that. So we are played. That's really what it comes down to. So so anyhow, that's our show today. It really comes down to, in California, is creating abundant water supply versus managing scarcity. You can do both the infrastructure improvements and the conservation also. I mean, nobody's discounting the fact that you always need to conserve and not be wasteful water, because it is a precious resource. But there's so much we're not doing that we could handle with additional infrastructure. The price tag, as you've seen, is expensive, but it's not out of line when you consider the fact that we're passing these water bonds that every few years that run into $10-20 billion range. It's not unreasonable to think that we could have a water bond that would focus on increasing the water abundance and focusing on this infrastructure that they've laid out here, and then really creating that abundance of water. And you do it for what is a relatively reasonable price tag. And I know most people are going to say, well, 118 billion is not reasonable, but if you look at what we fritter away in the government, this is money well spent, and you're going to pay the price eventually anyway. So even the part about degrading infrastructure and infrastructure basically falling apart over time because we're not doing the maintenance. There's costs there involved, and they're going to be hidden costs. You're going to see it in rate increases. You're going to see it in various places, and it's going to cost you more in the long run. We're going to pay for this at some point. That's really what it comes down to. So you might as well be open and upfront, and not only build the infrastructure, but basically make sure you have funds in place to maintain that infrastructure, which is something we don't do right now. We don't have capital improvement programs for maintaining infrastructure on a statewide basis. So a lot of water districts have CIPs for replacing equipment. A lot of those are chronically underfunded, of course, but at least it's headed in the right direction. But on a statewide level, it's just, we have our infrastructure, and we just kind of, count on passing a bond here and there to kind of do some critical maintenance. And with every passing day, every passing month, every passing year, that infrastructure degrades to the point where it may not even be usable or replaceable anymore. And the price tag on that gets pretty high when you're doing emergency repairs all the time. So what I'm saying is, you have some upfront costs that are calculated and known relatively well. They do have the caveat that it's hard to put the numbers together, but we do have some costs where we can actually put our finger on it, as opposed to these long-term costs of managing scarcity, and how that's so insidious and works its way into every aspect of our life, and we're paying for it one way or the other. So I'm a fan of investing in the infrastructure and maintaining it. So that's, I'll leave it right there, and and hopefully you'll have some comments on this. I appreciate you watching, and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Should we continue managing scarcity, or should we go big and develop the infrastructure that we need to for the long term? All right. So I just wanted to tell you I got a class coming up. This is July 12th through 14th on systematic well management. I am the groundwater guy, after all, teaching some classes. This is really 2 hours a day over 3 days. It's really designed format for water system managers. So that's so we got that coming up. We stream this show into the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel and on LinkedIn when LinkedIn works, which sometimes it looks like it's not working today. And so we do stream it into those places. So you can watch us there. All the past recordings are on Groundwater Guy YouTube channel, and I got a lot of stuff on there that I think you might enjoy. So go back and watch it. It kind of runs the gamut of things, of highly technical stuff, well diagnostics, and so there's a lot of good stuff there. But as always, leave comments. I love comments, and I always respond to the comments when I see them. So if you want to be a guest on Groundwater Talk Live, and I want to go back to having some guests here is the link to sign up to do that. And I'd love to have you on if you have a topic of interest to the water community. This would be certainly the place to do it. We'll get your word out there, and mostly it's having a good discussion about water, because that's what we're all about here. Okay, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to be notified when we have a new video come out, and we do pretty much every Thursday, then hit that little bell, and that'll tell you when we have a new video. It'll give you an alert. That is the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel, and we will see you next week.